Yeah. Mischa, have you met other panelists? I guess the five, you, Justin, Grant, Peter and Rene probably haven't met. Oh, you know Rene?
I met Rene before, but I haven't met Peter or Justin. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
Okay,
Hi, Mischa. Good to meet you too.
I'm going to broadcast, Linda.
Okay, how are we going for time? All righty. Right, I can see, yep, participants are coming in. Hi, everybody. Can just see that the number of participants are beginning to come online. We have about 358 registered for the webinar today. I'm just going to chew the fat and talk a little bit until we begin to see that number creep up. It's 129, or you're nice and early. Oh, 108 people, 109, all nice and early. Fantastic. Yeah. I'll just keep moving there. Yes. 122. Hope everybody's having a good day. It's a lovely sunny day here in Wellington. Very little wind, which is fantastic. So I think I might be going out for a walk at the end of the session and get some fresh air. Yeah. So up to 128, it's 130. We'll just give it another minute or two, folks, as we get our numbers up a little bit more, and then we'll come in and officially start the webinar. Gosh, 60 seconds goes a long time. We're still on 130. Oh, kia ora, Sean. I can begin to see people popping into the chat room. Nice to see you. Hi, Sophie. Hi, Debbie. Good to see you guys online. Oh, kia ora, Sharon from Te Tighe-Umbers. Good to see you guys. So we're just going to wait another couple of minutes before we kick into gear. We've got 170 online. And I think we will start in 60 seconds. Yeah. Kia ora, Colette. Kia ora, Nats. Hi, Tracy. Who else we got coming? Hey, Joe. Oh, hello. Privately. Kia ora, Debbie. Almost there. What have we got? 190. Oh, kia ora, Kiri. Good to see you again. Hi, Matt. The wonders of technology. Okay, Tanya and panelists, I think we will start the session. So, te hei Māori ora, no mai, haere mai, kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody, great to have you here on Tuesday for our tourism temperature webinar. We've got some great panelists to share some insights as to what's happening in their export sectors. But before we progress any further, I'll just hand over to Tanya, who will just take you through a bit of housekeeping. Thanks, Tanya.
Kia ora, thanks Linda, and thanks for joining the webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone should be on mute for the duration of the webinar. We will be doing some Q&A towards the end, so please use the Q&A box if you have questions that we will cover off at the end, and feel free, if you've got any concerns, to put a message in the chat box, but for Q&A, please use the Q&A box. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Tanya. Okay, so a very warm welcome to everybody, and particularly to our panelists. Great to have you on board. Oops, sorry, I just clicked off something wrong there. Oops. We have Justin Tighe-Umbers, who is the Executive Director of the Board of Airlines, airline representatives in New Zealand. I came to meet Justin through the work we've been doing on the C19 tag team. And the insights that he has shared with MB and those members on that group have been really helpful with our planning and just to be in the know. Also, Grant McPherson, his engagement manager is on the C19 tag team, and terrific to have Grant on board with the webinar today. Grant is the CEO of Education New Zealand, which is the export part of the education sector. A welcome to Mischa Mannix-Opie. So a number of you will have met Mischa in the past. Her current role is with the New Zealand Government Partnerships Office, which is a joint venture between New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. A very warm welcome, kia ora, to our colleague and friend, Peter Shelley, who is the Managing Director of the Australian Tourism Export Council. So over the years, ATEC and TECNZ have formed a very strong alliance, and we attend each other's conferences to keep in touch with what's happening in each other's inbound sectors. So welcome, Peter. And with Rene de Monchy, Director of Commercial Tourism New Zealand, many of you will know Rene. Today he's going to provide an update as what's happening with offshore markets and any intel. And of course, our lovely chair, Madam Chair Anna Black of TECNZ, and Anna will share some insights that inbounds have fed to her about what noises we're beginning, or what movement we're beginning to hear about with offshore markets. Thank you, Tanya. Over to the next slide. So each of the panelists have been brief. They're going to have about 4 to 5 minutes each to talk about what the state of their sector or their area of expertise in. Then a couple of minutes to try and crystal ball gaze a little bit about provide what they think the future outlook might be. Then we'll have some Q&A session with some questions, and then we'll come back to panelists to see if they can give us a tip for how we can plan a little bit when we begin to see some movement or some uplift with passenger travel. So as the order that I introduced everybody to, we will start off, I think, Justin, with you, if that's okay, and look forward to hearing your thoughts about the international airline and aviation sector and what you're actually seeing. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Linda. Now, just make sure that everyone can hear me.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yes,
it's passed. That's good. All right. Well, look, thanks very much for the invitation to join the panel today, and thank you to Tourism Export Council New Zealand. It's a great opportunity for us, and it's pretty clear as a wider industry, we're going to have to collaborate and partner together like never before. So it's fantastic to see Tourism Export Council leading the charge in that regard. So I'll just start off today just to talk a little bit about Barnes, who we are and what we do. So we're the industry association for airlines in New Zealand, and we've got 28 airline members. And as Linda said, I'd start off just with a current state and looking at the question, well, what is New Zealand's air connectivity to the world look like right now? And it's obviously a key question. Our air connections are absolutely critical for our economy. They directly enable 1 in 8 jobs. And each one of these connections has been worth hundreds of millions of dollars to our economy. So if you cast your mind back to this time last year, so April last year, we had 30 international airlines flying regular passenger services into New Zealand. That was connecting 44 cities directly around the world. And there were roughly around 740,000 inbound seats for the month of April. And so if we fast forward to this April, where we are right now, we've actually got 3 airlines now providing regular scheduled services. And that's out to 3 Pacific destinations and 6 international destinations. And that's in a very skeleton form, as you've no doubt seen through the media. and we've gone from 740,000 down to 40,000 seats capacity. So that's a 95% reduction in the number of flights, and it's just astonishing to be sitting here reeling off these numbers. It's been a seismic shock, obviously, for the aviation sector and for the wider tourism sectors, but it was just unimaginable when we started the year to think that we'd be talking about these sorts of numbers. So to move on, well, what's the sector doing now, and how are we looking to move forward? So we've just had Malaysian Airlines and Qatar, who are continuing to provide regular scheduled services. They've pulled out of the market, or suspended services, I should say, over the last couple of days. They've wound up their services. And airlines are in what I would describe as pause at the moment. So flights are still sitting in the international slot coordination schedule, but they're very much just waiting to see how the COVID environment and how international border restrictions play out and develop over the next few weeks. So the good news for New Zealand is nearly all of the airlines have suspended services as opposed to pulling out of the market or announcing pulling out of the market, which means they're there and waiting to recommence as soon as conditions improve. The existing flights that have got underway at the moment as a sector are predominantly around repatriation flights. So that's getting international visitors in New Zealand. There's still some quite large pools there getting home, and no doubt everyone's seen the German flights that have been put on. And then there's a whole lot of cargo flights that are going on, which is about maintaining our export and import links. When the passenger flights have heavily reduced, you've lost a whole lot of cargo capacity, and Ministry of Transport has been subsidising there to keep these freight links open, which are also critical to our economy. So probably the other thing that Barnes has done that I'll just touch on briefly is we've convened an aviation sector advisory group. And what that's doing is pulling together airlines and airports into a single body. And we've tasked ourselves with developing an aligned plan with government for how do we go about rebuilding these air connections. And that's both domestically and internationally. So the immediate actions that we've got underway there are looking at what level 2 and level 1 are going to mean for domestic travel in New Zealand. And that's starting to put some flesh on the bones, if you like, around what will the social distancing requirements need to be, what are the health screening requirements, how will people get to the airport, work through all of that detail. And that's so we can actually start to provide a bit of certainty through to the other sectors around how they can start to develop their plans and marketing. And then on an international perspective, we're looking at airlines. Some airlines are approaching Barnes already, asking the question, well, how do we start up our services again? And they're looking at timeframes of as early as June. And they're wanting to understand what the government requirements are there. And that's even within the existing border restrictions. So it's a positive signs there. And we're looking to work through and just give them good guidance in terms of what's going to be needed to allow them to recommence services. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of where we're at right now. And I'll hand over to the other panelists.
Great, thank you, Justin. It's nice to actually hear there might be possibly some movement in from July, but of course very mindful that the border restrictions will dictate any activation. Okay, Grant, if we could head to you to find out about the education sector, please.
Thank you, Linda. Kia ora tātou, and thanks very much for the opportunity to have a chat with you all. Just as a bit of background, Education New Zealand is a government agency responsible for international education, and as part of that, a large part of what we do is promote New Zealand as an education destination. Pre-COVID, international education and the students that came to New Zealand had a value of just under $5 billion. It employs 45,000 people and was the 5th largest foreign exchange earner. Of that valuation of nearly $5 billion, 200 million of that was the tourism activity of the student, but there was an additional $460 million which was visiting friends and family that were associated with the student being here. So not only a very big contributor to New Zealand and various communities, also quite a contributor to the tourism industry as well. Again, our normal expectation is we would have around about 120,000 students coming to New Zealand for study. That ranges from everything from primary school through to PhD. It is delivered by state-owned institutions such as universities, polytechs, schools, but also by private providers. And there are 850 providers who take international students into their institutions for education. So that's kind of what we had 6 weeks ago. What we've got now is quite a collapse. We are a little bit different from tourism in that we have 2 major tranches where students come to New Zealand. That tends to be the January-February period, late January and February period, and then again in July-August. We at the moment have just over 50,000 students still in New Zealand studying. Some of these will be on short courses and they will be heading home within the next month or so, but some of them will be for multi-years. So what we're trying to do is make sure we retain as many of those students as we possibly can. So one of the things that has really happened with our industry, as it's happening with many of you, is the border restrictions mean that we are not anticipating any students entering into New Zealand, at least for the remainder of this year and probably for most of next year. And that's not only driven by what we do, what New Zealand does, but will also be dependent on how other countries react and what state they are going to be in. For us, the investment in education for families is pretty significant. If there is a recession or high job loss and high unemployment around the world, their desire to travel is going to be greatly limited. So we're not too sure. There's still quite a lot of work to do in understanding buyer and consumer behaviours. So there's quite a bit of stuff going on there. We also have quite a significant number of issues relating to visas. Many students come here for particular periods of time for particular courses of study in particular providers. Of course, all of that starts to get very mixed up as dates start to expire and a whole range of things. So there's quite a bit of work that Immigration New Zealand is doing in terms of trying to make sure we've got a seamless approach to those that are in New Zealand with visas. The challenge here is if a student ends up or their visa expires on them while they're studying, they of course become illegal in New Zealand. So there's quite a big concern around that. And of course, as Justin talked about, we have had a number of students also as part of that repatriation flights that for Germany. And a lot of those students are under 18, so they need chaperoning and quite significant pastoral care. So there's been quite a bit of work done around that. We have spent quite a bit of time over the last 4 to 6 weeks trying to gauge and understand the sentiment of the market. And there's probably a few key things, and they are positive for us, not to lose sight of the positive side of things. One is that New Zealand is being viewed very favourably for the actions we've taken. The branding that has gone on for New Zealand around, particularly around kaitiakitanga and our care for people and for our place, has really resonated overseas, at least in the areas we deal with, and that people can see that that is how New Zealand thinks and operates. We have also got very good feedback around the care and welcoming that the international students that are stuck here, many miles away from their parents and family, the way they're being treated and looked after also has got good international miles. So while this is a pretty shocking state we're in, there is some positives to start to think about and build on. So Linda, I'll leave it at that around where we're at.
Terrific. Thank you, Grant. Appreciate those insights. And yes, hopefully we're going to follow some similar trends with some uplift later in the year or early next year. Mischa, if we could get your insights, thanks, and also learn about the department that you're working in. And I did forget to mention at the start of the session, everybody, we're going to do about 40 minutes with the panel. And then allow about 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. And there are a couple of tourism media on the webinar listening to what you're sharing as well. So thank you, Mischa.
Thanks, Linda, and kia ora i te whānau. My thoughts are with you at the moment, my tourism family, for what you are all experiencing at the moment. I know it's an incredibly challenging time. To give you some context around the area that I look after, I'm the Executive Director of what's known as Government to Government Know-How, or we call G2G. And it's a partnerships office that is co-owned JV between New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Set up in 2014 to take New Zealand state sector IP into foreign governments and sell it overseas. So basically take our great expertise in particular sectors and commercialise and internationalise that into offshore markets, into foreign governments, whether they be federal, state or provincial. We focus in particular sectors and we focus in particular markets. So to give you a bit of a scan, I'll explain that, but also talk a little bit about what we're seeing in those markets and in those sectors. Tourism isn't actually a key sector for us. The areas that we put a lot of our focus in is sustainable food systems, such as food security and food safety. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. We also work in around ease of doing business and government effectiveness and innovation. New Zealand's got #1 world ranking in ease of doing business, and other countries, particularly developing ones, want a piece of that and understand why we do that so well. So some examples, we broker deals. So we bring the state sector supplier into the demand opportunity at the other end and broker those deals. So a couple of examples to bring that to life. We recently did a project with a New Zealand supplier and the Karnataka state government in India, working with them on an accelerated program to improve the ease of doing business across the state. And we have a huge World Bank funded project over 6 million in value in Sri Lanka, which is modernising the agricultural system. So a real range of different projects, predominantly in developing markets, but also in the Gulf. But as you can probably understand from what I've said already, a lot of what we do is requiring travel and taking New Zealand expertise into market. So we've got the flip side of what the tourism industry is experiencing in terms of instead of bringing people in, although we do bring delegations in for learning experiences, we're struggling to get our experts, or we can't get our experts at the moment, into markets to either progress projects already in play, progress deals already in our pipeline, or actually start developing new leads and new prospects to pull into our pipeline. So the majority of the work that we've got's on hold, and it sits in a postponement and delay function until such time as the markets open up, or certain markets open up and travel starts again. We've also experienced some cancellations in terms of deals that were time-bound that saw travel coming to New Zealand for particular programs that start at particular times of the year, that they've missed that opportunity, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to reignite those for the same time next year. Certain markets that we're active in and what we're seeing. So we do quite a lot of work in Vietnam, particularly in the sustainable foods area, and also in some education projects. And we're actually seeing in that market that it's our most resilient, interestingly. They've got good control of COVID-19, probably partly due to their experience with SARS, where they got hit hard and took a lot of learnings from that. So from a government perspective and the work that we do, we're seeing that market holding and being quite resilient. That's also helped by a number of free trade agreements that are coming into force soon, which will keep that market quite buoyant. Our largest value markets in the Gulf region, so GCC, that's predominantly UAE, but also Saudi Arabia. And although those markets have got long-term economic challenges, that's offset by the resources they have for fiscal support. So we're seeing the interest in the G2G work that we're doing is still there. The conversations are still going. We're progressing as if the deals and the projects can start, but knowing that they'll probably go on hold, but at least converting them to an agreement and to a project with value, and then we'll start those, implement those when we can. India is another market we do work in, particularly around ease of doing business, and that's going through severe economic disruption, and I'm sure Rene will probably talk about that a little bit later with India, but all our activity there has predominantly halted. And in Indonesia, that market's also slowed up for us. Economic growth we're expecting to slow quite significantly. But there are some gems and some glimmers that we're sort of focused on at the moment. So a lot of our work at the moment is going into crystal ball gazing, building our market insights, understanding from our teams in market, but also through our partners such as World Bank, what they're seeing and where the opportunities might lie for our work. And one of those is around sustainable food systems, so food security and food safety. Countries now are recognising more than ever the need for food security, particularly given that COVID appears to have come from potentially food safety issues, but also we're also finding that the need for countries to want to be more self-sufficient in their own agriculture and horticulture and their own food production, and so understanding how New Zealand does that well and taking some of those learnings. Government effectiveness and innovation is still going to be of interest in the markets when they open up again. So reducing bureaucracy, speeding up how governments can respond to COVID and take actions quickly. So we're seeing that area for us will still maintain some focus for us when markets open up. But I keep talking about when markets open up, and of course we don't know when that will be. And so right now we're working with a lot of our suppliers to try and understand how we can flip their delivery mechanism to remote and digital delivery. So examples of that might actually be around online workshops, running design sprints and accelerators that are using online tools. It may be around using videos for agricultural products and helping the in-market client set up their systems to give better data coming back through, so we can actually progress a lot of the implementation work, but do it remotely. So that's getting really interesting for us. Of course, our suppliers have to be willing and have to believe that that will work. Also, our clients have to believe that that's a mechanism that will still give them value in the project. So that's quite a bit of work for us to do, not only flipping the project delivery, but also flipping and probably putting a bit of marketing spin on the value that that will still bring to them, working in a slightly different way than they'd planned. That's a quick summary. I'll leave it there before I could talk for ages, so I'll just I'll back.
Thanks, Mischa, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of inbounds that, even though we're not talking specifically about the tourism sector, that might be going with some light bulb ideas coming off to try to look at some opportunities with that food technology, food sector type of work that the governments are doing, and perhaps bring some inbound tours, you know, whether they're a week for mill or a 2 week for mill, to actually learn about the processes and the IP on the ground. So thank you, very helpful. Peter, Shelley, hello. Peter, how are things over across the ditch, my friend?
Oh my goodness me! Where should we start, Linda? I don't know. Hello, and look, good to be part of your webinar, and congratulations on running it, Linda and the team at TECNZ. We just LATEC, just for the sake of the introduction, very similar organisation, TECNZ, in that we are the inbound body and work with more than 1,000 businesses across the country, and have a lot of insight into what's happening out there, and it's not all good, as we know. So I think we are probably very similar, in similar amount of pain, sadly, at the moment. But what it is what it is. What's happening here in Australia? Well, the story is a bit similar. We started with drought. I'm not sure. I think you had floods Then we had some bushfires, which didn't help us very much either, and that was a pretty painful start to our year in January in particular, when we lost a lot of international bookings, cancellations over that bushfire period, and forward cancellations or bookings didn't translate in the key booking windows from our Western markets over that period of time, which was, we thought it was the end of the world at that stage, and then we found another end of the world when COVID started. So yeah, it is quite a journey, and like it's real testament to the resilience of our industry. I'm sure collectively that we're all still smiling and still working through what this challenge is we have in front of us without really any knowledge of the end point. And I think that's the big challenge that we face certainly over here, is the uncertainty of it all and how to plan to survive. Our government talks about crossing the COVID bridge and getting to the other side, which I think is a pretty good analogy. But you know, I'm not sure how long that bridge is. Certainly feels pretty steep, this bridge at the moment too. So pretty dire all the way around. But when COVID took place, I think similar to you guys, I think we operate very similarly with a lot of the policies from government, closing the borders, which, you know, got a lot of flack from initially. But I think the industry was thinking, oh my God, this is probably a bit of an overreaction, but it proven to be the right routine, and we're all in a state of shock and horror, and couldn't believe it, to be honest, when all of this landed, especially the closure of China, and that impacted education as well, of course, and then it all went on from there. So I think for us, I assume the same for you, although maybe you had some government support a bit earlier than us, but we probably for a couple of weeks were really doing major circles, thinking how we're going to survive through this. And the government was very constructive here, both state and federal, I have to say, and really getting on board with all of the economy. But tourism was seen as being somebody you know, quite impacted significantly early, and so access some support. A lot of jobs were shed very early. I think people really just felt, well, you know, the closure of the industry effectively. Mind you, at that stage, we still had a bit going on with domestic tourism for a little while. There was still a view that we could travel domestically. So whilst it's not an international consideration, all of our members, or I'd say probably 75% of our members, 80% of our members are obviously sellers or people that provide experiences, and therefore they were able to still get maybe a small feed out of the domestic experiences that were taking place, but that then all closed down, of course, off the back of you know, social distancing and all of the other measures that were put in place to reduce travel and reduce contact and contain the virus, which again has been, like you, very impressive where you guys have been in containing the virus and where you are now, and our curve has been flattened significantly as well, and we're all, you know, well, they say cautiously optimistic, but the message is certainly coming out of our government is, you know, don't get in front of yourselves. As a community, as an economy, we've still got a fair way to go if we're going to actually make sure we can actually come out of this in a reasonable state. Our economy is in very difficult times, like all economies across the world. So, in our industry specifically, well, it's in hibernation, and I assume yours is as well. The good thing about the government subsidy, it was what's called JobKeeper over here. It's a subsidy that that businesses can get to actually retain their staff at $1,500 a fortnight, which is not a massive amount, but it's enough to keep the wolf from the door, so to speak, and retaining core staff assets on your books, which I know we were very keen and lobbied a lot about, and the government came through across the industry for that. And I think it's going to allow us to hang in there for a little bit longer, however long that is. This goes for 6 months at the moment, whether that will be reviewed. But it's interesting to see the commentary around, you know, where we're looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, and one of your presenters commenting that, you know, there might be some domestic travel coming up soon, and maybe international travel. You know, I think it was mid of the year or a little bit later than that. While, you know, we're certainly not getting those messages over here at this stage. Whilst we'd like to think the same, I think in truth, probably what we're seeing and probably preparing for is domestic travel, hopefully opening up, well, I don't know, maybe in 3 months' time. This is absolutely a guess here, but I know the industry is all planning to try and take advantage when that does open up, and that will mean interstate, intrastate travel over a period of time, but very much within our own Australian bubble in that context, like you will be. And mind you, we've just lost one of our major airlines today, which is another sad story and sad outcome and a result of where we sit, and flights generally within our country and to our country, just what's the lifeblood of our industry. So it's quite concerning, that the seriousness of this impact it's having, and what our rebound will be like. But having said that, we have got a strong Australian population, and hopefully, if they're not too damaged from loss of jobs and removal of leave, I would hopefully see some domestic travel take place, in maybe Q3 of this year. So that's a hopeful outlook. But having said that, we're now just in this sort of hunkered down hibernation supportive phase as an industry group. We're actively working with our membership right across the board in the broader industry. In fact, see this as a time whilst we can't really do much else in a travel context in generating business. We can hang together. We can, communication lines are super open, which is wonderful. And so webinars like you're running here today, it's just tremendous. We're doing quite a bit of this as well. Trying to tackle some of the issues where there's question marks that everybody's got, trying to understand insights into markets generally via our network of inbound tour operators in particular, and then just trying to provide some capability building where people can actually learn some skills while they're in this environment. I think that's our upside and that's our opportunity at the moment, and just to stay connected. But no challenging times for everybody. But we've just got to hang in there and find a way through at this stage.
Great. Oh, look, thanks, Peter. That's a great update, and hopefully it gives some, small amount of comfort for our industry. Your industry are going through very similar feelings and waves of change, because the pace of change has just been so fast. Certainly, one of the things that we've been lobbying very hard with government across all the agencies is our wage subsidy is for 12 weeks, and we are really hoping that government can extend that to 26 weeks, so we can sort of approach spring with a little bit more optimism, even though we know international travel may not happen at that point in time. Yeah. Terrific. Thanks, Peter. Rene, how are you going? And keen to hear how your offshore teams are, and any intel you're picking up from the markets. I'll take it away.
Right, thank you, Linda. Kia ora tātou, everybody. And a bit as per the previous speakers, just kind of acknowledge these kind of unprecedented, overused term, but unprecedented challenging times that the whole industry and sector is going through. I'll give you a quick update on kind of how we're thinking about it at Tourism New Zealand. We are thinking in three phases, if you like, that all overlap with each other, as you can imagine. We're now in more of a respond, pause, test and prepare phase almost, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And we think as things start moving again, we will start moving into kind of a kickstart and rebuild as we can help catalyze that. And then the third phase being really recovering and getting back to enriching New Zealand. We, as all of you on the call, have a firm belief that tourism enriches New Zealand, and the sooner we can get back to that, the better it is. But that might take, longer than we'd originally thought. So we're really thinking about this from a multi-year approach. Look, tourism will be, as we all know, will be key to the economic recovery of New Zealand post-COVID-19. And we all have the firm belief that people will travel again. It's just how and when they're able to do that is going to be the challenge. So the focus for us at Tourism New Zealand is a few things, and I'll just talk you through some of it. Is first and foremost, brand building for a destination is not done. You don't just switch that on and see the result the next day. So we will carry on brand building for destination New Zealand, even whilst there's travel restrictions in place. So we believe that we have an important role to play in kind of keeping brand New Zealand alive in the hearts and minds of potential visitors, and we will continue to do that. Having said that, where traditionally we might do a lot of kind of destination brand work, dreaming, and then ultimately it leads to conversion work where we might partner with airlines or other partners to be able to convert off that work. Obviously, the conversion piece is going to be limited in the short term, but we will carry on with brand building, and our team at the moment are working on how we need to adapt our messages for that, because we will need to adapt. The campaign that we had, which was Good Morning World, is currently in kind of development on what the content would look like. But rest assured, we will continue to focus on brand building, because as you all know, if you're sitting in the UK and you start thinking about New Zealand, it might in normal times be 9 or 12 months before you actually arrive, and now it might even be a bit longer. So even more reason for us to keep kind of brand alive. In the medium term, our focus is really on going, what is the phasing of the markets that can open? And as you know, we don't have any direct influence on that, apart from reminding those that are making those decisions of the importance of the Australian market, the China and the US market. Certainly from an international perspective, once you get those three markets up and running, that's around about 60% of the total sector from a passenger number and roughly from a value perspective as well. So we are kind of well connected in with airlines, airports, as well as different parts of government to help feed that information to them. We've also been asked, as you would have seen, to help with kind of kickstarting the domestic economy as well, or the domestic tourism economy, and we think that's a great opportunity for us to partner with trade, with RTOs, to think about how we can get New Zealanders engaging in the tourism economy. The thinking still is that's likely to be the first piece of tourism activity that's going to actually happen in the market. So how can we help in that? How can we facilitate in that? Partner with industry, partner with RTOs in terms of getting people mobilised and getting people moving around New Zealand. When that will happen, we don't really know. But we're preparing that work now. Realistically, people moving around domestically, we probably have to be at level 1 for people to really move between regions and be able to fly around the country. But there will be opportunities possibly at a more localised level for people to start engaging with activities closer into home at level 2 also. And I guess one last point to make, whilst I talk about continuing brand building, another piece of our focus is in our international markets is we continue to do some of our core activities, such as training the trade. So we have the advantage, I guess, in a strange way, that China has been in this situation longer than the other markets. And the team in China, over the last 6 or 7 weeks of being effectively locked down, have completed, I think, somewhere along the lines of 13 trade training events, have trained 15,000 travel agents, but all doing that virtually. So we continue to create, to kind of facilitate those trade training core tasks that we've always done. But it is going to look a little different in the medium term, but we will continue to focus on kind of brand building desire for New Zealand, and how can we help in facilitating and training travel trade, how can we create platforms for operators to kind of apart from that, Linda, maybe just touch on the point, what we are hearing from lots of our markets is a real desire and to travel. It's just the knowledge of when they're able to travel, right? So what you guys are probably all hearing is that people are feeling a bit locked up, like we all are, and looking forward to the day that we can travel. So it's important for us to keep New Zealand kind of top of mind during that time.
Yeah.
So that we're on that list.
Great, thanks, Rene. Really helpful to know that all the current trade training is still going on in market, and I guess even from a digital point of view, there may be some more adaptations as to how we can still remain top of mind and also push our brand proposition forward. It's going to be really competitive when international connectivity kicks back into gear. So yeah, pleased to hear about that brand value proposition still being top of mind. Okay, so Anna, over to you now, and I think Anna's got a couple of insights of what we've been picking up from some markets as well.
Sorry, kia ora whānau. I've just been sitting in the background here. I've got small children who have gone from screaming at each other to jumping on the trampoline to now banging on the door. So I'm just texting my brother-in-law to come and get them so that we don't have all this background noise. Sorry, the realities of working from home and me and my bubble with my sister and her family, which I love, but I'm looking forward to expanding the bubble. So kia ora, everybody. I guess, thank you so much for joining this seminar. And, Linda's asked me to really comment on the ITO and the tech membership point of view. We never thought we would be in a position with nil income for potentially 12 to 18 months. So that is a really tricky position to be in that we're all trying to navigate our way through. But the other really interesting thing and great thing that's come out of all this is the communication and the whānau and the camaraderie around it all, that we are all in this together. I know these are all terms we're all talking a lot about, but when I went out, Linda and I went out to some of our ITO members to get some feedback about the market, everyone's saying the same thing and aligned. So that's kind of nice to know that we're all on the right track, if you like. So everyone's guessing what international travel might look like as we move back into international travel. But like Grant said, New Zealand's currently being seen in a positive light for leading the way with our early action to COVID-19 and to halt it. And as in the past, we've been seen as a safer destination compared to others. Most overseas agents are hoping for resumption of travel in October, November, with tighter controls put in place at the airports before boarding. For example, 10-minute testing. I guess the million-dollar question, of which we seem to have a few of those at the moment, is whether the world waits for a vaccine to restart international travel, or whether a world short of a vaccine will start travelling with stringent measures in place. If there's self-isolation on arrival in New Zealand, that just won't work for the international leisure traveller or corporate traveller, as we all know. So regarding forward bookings, there's still good interest from agents, but they aren't the ones that need the convincing, it's the passengers themselves. Of the ITOs I've spoken to, however, New Zealand has been well perceived by agents as doing all the right things, and most agents we've spoken to have not lost any forward bookings for New Zealand. However, they've had cancellations for other destinations where social distancing or healthcare is not as good as New Zealand is perceived to be. Most ITOs' April-May bookings have been pushed to October-November a few weeks ago, and we're now all working on moving these bookings, having them backed up for perhaps February or March in case the borders are opened post-Christmas rather than in spring. So there's a lot of booking, rebooking, as the general opinion out there changes. So we all just need a better indication of when our borders might reopen and to whom, but we all understand it's a moving feast, of course. So I've just got some updates by market, which I thought I would share from our ITOs. The US, it's really in a holding mode with no decisions made yet by the powers that be, and we've seen how Mr. Trump is handling things. Every state has its own agenda, with some collaborating, but there are still many mixed messages on when the borders will reopen. So in saying that, the industry are very careful to say they just don't know yet. So like us, it's a bit of a waiting game. We're seeing bookings for 2020 in early January now. So it does give us an indication the consumer is thinking that later this year will be okay for travelling. There's still a genuine wish and need for travel. It's just there are so many questions around social distancing and how this will work. Travel agents and tour operators in market are all keen to connect, especially with regards to training, webinars on destinations and product. So we're thinking mid-May might be a little clearer from the US as to where they are with COVID-19. The UK and Europe, very slow out of the UK and Europe for new inquiries, but we're seeing planning continue for 2021 and 22, beyond into 2022, for those who currently have series or bookings regularly in place. We've had no big cancellation, or we've seen no big cancellations yet for 2020 bookings, for late 2020 bookings, so it's again, a wait and see attitude for the latter part of this year. China, in terms of the China market, There's no noise of outbound travel at all yet. Promotion of tourism and travel is restricted. Attractions and recreation facilities have opened in China, but you need to prove you are healthy with an approved QR code to access. Travel will start internally, so interprovincially and nationally or domestically for China as well, until at least the end of 2020. And the New Zealand border was closed to Chinese nationals on the 3rd of February, so it will help if the border is opened or softly opened with proper border screening or special measures in place as we move to that. The India market, agents are upskilling on destinations and ITOs are doing training webinars for FIT and group agents. No agents are receiving any inquiries for travel anywhere, whether domestically within India or internationally, and they themselves extended their lockdown for another 2 weeks last week, just after Easter. But agents are optimistic of business by October, as long as the airlines are available and the borders are open. Same story. Southeast Asia, as with other markets, the story is very similar. A few of the key Southeast Asia countries are badly affected, with numbers of COVID-19 cases not showing a slowdown. So no sign of forward inquiries, put aside any bookings for at least the next 3 months or more. But most are, again, on a wait-and-see scenario, especially eyeing on when respective countries' borders might open for airlines to start flying in before planning and advertising for the future. And finally, South America, Latin America, out of interest, LATAM Airlines have just recently offered special fares between September to November as a sign they're hopeful that the borders will open by then. Like the rest of the world, everything's on hold in South America while they wait for more an idea. Mexico's much the same, but there's definitely some activity similar to the US markets where quotes and bookings have been coming in for late 2020 onwards. We expect Air New Zealand will update us by the end of May as to their plans post 30 June, hopefully. And the feeling we get is that South America, especially Chile and Argentina, may come back quicker than the US and UK Europe. That's all from me, Linda.
Great, that was a really thorough update. Thanks, Anna. And to get it market by market is really helpful. And I guess the message for us to continue to share with MB and government is that tourism is not broken. Okay, it is just on a big pause at the moment until each country addresses or assesses where their health issues and boundaries are, but there is certainly interest from the visitor side, airline side, that once connections are remade, we could possibly see some uplift later in the year. I think across all the panels sharing, we've kind of covered off question 2 already about what the future outlook is. It's just, we all just have to wait and see. And I'm mindful of time, and I think I'd like to get into Q&A if that's all right, everybody, and then we'll come back for your last tip for businesses. So we've had a number of questions pop in. Thanks, everyone. This is a question for Anna and Peter, but it has actually been repeated about 4 or 5 times from various attendees. Is a short to medium term trans-Tasman bubble a realistic goal to pursue? Are the 2 export tourism councils involved in discussions around that? Peter, should we go to you first?
Oh, I get the privilege of going first. Thank you very much. Is the trans-Tasman bubble on our agenda? Absolutely. We're, like, as an industry, let's say as an industry, excited about the thought, excited about the opportunity. And is it real? I think yes. What's the timing? Got no idea, to be honest. I get a feeling the timing coming out of New Zealand might be in front of where our psychology around timing is, and that's only because of where we are in the containment of the virus and capability to actually do all of that sort of thing. This is all very high level commentary I'm providing here at the moment, but surely it makes sense to find a way to open up our borders and work together in this context. You know, we've been great co-travellers as countries forever. And so, you know, New Zealand is still our second largest number of visitors, 1.3 million last year. I'd like them to stay Well, they stay here a while. I'd like them to spend a bit more while they're here, perhaps. But yeah, it's just a wonderful relationship that we have, and the way the health systems are hopefully working together. And then we've got the airline consideration. Can we get all these sort of things lined up in an appropriate way? And what do we need to do as an industry to build the runway, if you like, of the triggers we need to understand, that we need to have in place in order to get down to the end of the runway and take off, so to speak. So those triggers from an Australian context certainly have not been defined. I'm sure there's people starting to work on them. ATEC as an organisation are very interested in this discussion. We're not involved in a discussion formally as yet, because I'm not aware of one formally taking off, but there is certainly the starting of a discussion taking place. We've got a board meeting, in fact, this week, and it's on our agenda as to where we position ourselves in that context. But no, look, the intent, absolutely. The capability of both countries, I would assume, getting the processes right to provide a safe experience for the customer is key. Virus. I think what do businesses need to do to be COVID ready, if you like, going forward? We're starting to do in that area. We've got a health and safety checklist, which we all share this health and safety checklist concept, and can we find some appropriate criteria to incorporate into our health and safety checklist to lead and educate our industry generally on what we need to be doing to prepare to accept visitors, to protect our staff, and accept our visitors in a safe environment going forward. So these are all parts of this solution, I think. But if we can find a way through, which I would say we can, it'll just probably then come down to time. Yeah. And so what does timing look like? I've really got no idea. Certainly the messaging that we get from a government point of view is, hold on to your horses at this stage. Maybe Q4 would be probably something that we should work to. We sometimes talk here in our industry about putting a peg in the sand, putting a light on the hill, something we can all aim for. And if we need to move the peg further back when we get closer, well, we do that. But we're all sort of heading in this path together in a united way to actually return bigger and better than we've ever been before. And I think that sort of discussion is really relevant in this context as well.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Peter. Anything to add, Anna?
No, I think Peter summed it up really nicely, and that's absolutely where TEC and ATEC are aligned. I mean, Linda's on the COVID-19 committee as well, and we're pushing that when it's appropriate. And ultimately, it will come down to the comfort level of the tourists themselves for travel. So, as Peter said, to be COVID ready and have that information out there will probably be a big part of the promotions that go around all this as we move forward.
Right. All right. Thank you. Now, Justin, I'm not sure whether this is something you can answer, but there's a question about, is there a statistic about the number of passengers who have rebooked for next year versus taken a refund?
No doubt there is, Linda. It's not one that I've got at my fingertips, unfortunately, but yeah, happy to see if we can dig that one out offline. And perhaps just to add very quickly on the previous question, because I think it's a fascinating one that everyone's interested in around Trans-Tasman, and the initiative, the Trans-Tasman initiative got floated by Auckland Airport and Adrian Littlewood last week, I think, on getting this set up. And I think now is the time to really start working on it, and it is something that we're looking to move forward in the aviation sector around aligning what those border and health screening settings need to be. So that work is slowly getting underway, and I think we'll start to move into a working group phase, we hope, in the next few weeks. And that's about being ready for the time when we might find ourselves in the happy situation where both countries have managed to flatten the curve or squash it, indeed. And I think that may well happen with pre-vaccine, and hearing the Prime Minister talk about moving to the smartest border in the world, well, what better opportunity could we have to lead the world between Australia and New Zealand, and also out to Pacific Islands as well. So that's something we're heavily focused on moving forward and starting work on that now.
Nice, nice. And while I have you, there's another question probably mostly related to you. How is New Zealand placed for airlines in a post-COVID recovery? Are we seen as the least interesting part of the world to think of in an airline restart?
Great question.
Yeah.
Look, I think we've seen off the back of the GFC and potentially at SARS, New Zealand, because of where we sit in the world, has been faced a lag when it comes to reconnectivity with airlines. I think what's so important through the phase now is that we work really closely with airlines and give them as much clarity as we can around border settings and show that we're proactive in terms of trying to re-establish these links through things like the smart border. But I think also when we're turning to a recovery plan phase, and what's going to need to happen there, and Rene's touched on it, is I think around looking at subsidising connections starting, and we're proposing from Barnes to do that from a cost perspective. So border agencies, navigation costs, airport charges, can we support subsidising those through an initial recovery phase to make it more attractive for airlines to re-establish connections on what's a very long haul part of the world and non-east-west northern hemisphere connections for them. So I think if we play it smart, and particularly if we've got a COVID-free or a COVID-light environment, we've got some opportunities there to get the jump on the rest of the world.
Yeah. Great, thanks Justin. And there's plenty of questions coming in. I am mindful of time, so if people, it's 2:29, so if people do have to pop off, that's fine. I think we'll go another 5 or 10 minutes for questions if for those that are able to hang around. But Justin, I know you've got to leave, you've got to head off to another meeting. Any tips, any last tips you might have?
I think as a sector, it's just reminding government and reminding New Zealand of the importance to the economy, and really just pushing and advocating for that we try and find smart ways through this, and not necessarily say a border closure for 18 months is a black and white position. I think we can think our way through it, and if we come together as a sector and contribute into that thinking, we can get some leadership going in this space across New Zealand.
Great. I'm going to throw one last one at you, Justin. What is your view that two major Chinese airlines still operate direct flights to New Zealand weekly? Will they halt at some stage if the border continues to be closed?
Yeah, so the two things fueling those at the moment are cargo, and also the pools of people that are still able to travel between those countries, and coming into New Zealand, of course, that's New Zealand nationals or permanent residents only. And so over time, those pools will drain. We hope that cargo will be the mainstay in maintaining those connections. But until there's a meaningful change on border restrictions, yeah, the risk over time is, of course, that it gets harder and harder for airlines to continue to operate.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate your input today, and wish you and your team all the best over the upcoming months.
Pleasure. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Justin. Okay, Anne, I have a question for you. Any update on Japan or South Korea markets?
I didn't get any updates on those ones specifically, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We can come back. We can come back.
From our own business point of view, from General Travel's point of view, Japan's very in line with all the other markets. It's a wait and see. We are planning for next year and booking for 2021, but nothing that for Japan, nothing that I've seen that's out of the ordinary of the other markets that I updated on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anna. A question for Grant. Will you be considering to apply for 14 days enforceable quarantine package for the international students who are willing to pay in advance?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there, Linda, thank you. There's another question there about the New Zealand government looking at border restrictions, and is there any work being done? And just to assure everybody there are teams of people looking at this from a sort of practical and a policy perspective. I think that one of the things we've been talking to other government agencies, particularly the policy agencies, is how tight are the border restrictions going to be in the long term? Are there going to be any sort of potential exemptions for different types of travellers? For us, that's students. We are also working with some economic development agencies around the regions, together with tourism operators, with Tourism New Zealand, around is there a way to bring students into New Zealand. They do their quarantine, say, with a hotel operator.
Right, yes.
The tourism piece in this, and then and they get online delivery of some of their programs while they're in quarantine. So there's quite a bit of work being done around, can we innovate around some of the product that New Zealand has to offer, and how can you sort of engage with international students or foreign travellers while they're potentially in quarantine.
Yeah.
So there is quite a bit of thinking to do in trying to make sure all of the rules and regulations sort of line up, and all of the capability around keeping everybody's health at the top of everybody's mind, make sure that's all clear as well.
Okay, well, thanks for Grant. You're right, there was two questions in that particular question. I've got a few that I can do some quick answers to, because I'm conscious of time. Still lots of questions coming in about the Australian border. Can we use, maybe for you, Mischa, perhaps, or Anna, can we use ITO market knowledge from the source market in an apparatus to be used to maximise New Zealand trade and enterprise opportunities? So I guess what I'm reading in between there, Mischa, is could inbounds actually assist your agency with helping to open up some opportunities?
Never say no to opportunity discussion. So from a G2G perspective, I can't speak on specifically on behalf of NZTE, but from a G2G perspective, possibly, and happy to have a conversation with the attendee on email or by phone to explore that further and what that might mean. In terms of market knowledge and source market information, just on an NZTE perspective, there is a hub set up on the NZTE website specifically around COVID with export information, but also by sector and also on the economy. So if you go to nzte.gov.nz and click on the top link, you can go straight into that COVID site. That's getting updated regularly, so if people want further market information that's from a broader perspective beyond travel and tourism, that's accessible as well. But yeah, happy to have a conversation with the attendee if they want to progress that further.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Mischa. A question for Rene. We're starting to see a raft of empathy campaigns produced overseas, and a very good video from AT last week. Is TECNZ working on something similar?
Yeah, no, a really good question. We are seeing actually some quite interesting stuff, just a new one from Tourism Switzerland that you might have seen, where they're projecting different flags from around the globe as well on Mont Blanc, which is quite beautiful. Yes, we are working on exactly that. In fact, we are active in social again with support behind that. So we've been social posting for the last few weeks. We are currently working on what that content should look like. So we are well through the process of kind of getting that developed, and then that will definitely be coming out.
Right,
content.
right.
But we wanted it to be appropriate. We just continuation of Good Winter Build did seem appropriate.
Yeah, terrific. I'm sure there are many networks that we've got that we can push that message out to remember to keep us in your thinking and your thoughts and at the top of the bucket list. And hopefully perhaps with the profile and the New Zealand's reputation with the way we've managed this, that we may be pushed further up the bucket list compared to many other countries that we'll be competing with. So
yeah, I think so. I think that's right, Linda. I think our profile has been raised in that regard.
Yeah, great. And there's a couple of fast questions I'll finish off with, and then we'll quickly go to tips. I do know the government will be working with Australia once each country has their situation under control and they can see a bit of a path forward. I'm sure both countries will be looking at supporting each other with inbound and outbound travel. Let's have a quick scroll down here. If the Trans-Tasman bubble goes ahead, would that extend to the Pacific Islands. I'm going to suggest it probably will, as long as the islands also have got their health situation under control. I know that is something that Richard Lauder and Adrian Littlewood have both proposed in some of their recent articles. So I think we'll call it a day with the Q&A, everybody, and we'll go to each panelist for one tip for businesses as to what to do to help with planning. So I think we'll go to Mischa first. Thanks. One tip, please.
I think what we're doing, and I can't tell anyone I'm only suggesting, but what we're doing is being agile and ready to flex. Our demand profile will change, and we need to be able to go with it. Markets will open at different pace, at different times and in a different way. And as much as we can have a plan, we'll need to be able to be dynamic and move with the opportunity when it presents itself and know what those triggers are.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mischa. Peter, how about you? One tip.
One tip, that's impossible for me, Linda. I'm going to say communication, especially we're finding communication with trade partners in particular, between suppliers and trade partners, really critical. We can do it all the time, so let's facilitate that. Stay positive and stay connected. That'll do me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. Grant, over to you.
I think the idea of trying to be creative and innovate around new products and new arrangements that maybe weren't there or weren't necessary a wee while ago, and how do we then take that to market. I think one of our biggest risks, sorry to go on, is that New Zealand will be forgotten, and we need to make sure we keep visible in the international marketplace as a destination, whether that's for tourism or study. And the way to do that is to have product that people want, but it can't just be the old stuff. It probably needs to be rethought.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Grant. Rene.
Yeah, probably just to touch on the earlier points, I think it is around agility. Thinking the point that Mischa made about how do we kind of flex and adapt. And a concrete example of that is, I think the reality is for New Zealand tourism operators in the short to medium term, it's going to be New Zealanders who are going to be your number one customer. Yeah. So how do you adapt your business, your offering and your product to that audience? It's going to be a bigger share of your business than it was possibly last year.
Great, thanks Rene. And Anna, a last tip from the inbound sector.
So I'm going to take everybody's tips because I love that we've got to be dynamic, we've got to be agile. You know, we've been in business for 46 years and that's changing all the way through, has been that agility. But don't break what isn't broken. The distribution chain is hugely important, and as we go out there and recover, you know, pricing is always such a, it's an S fight. And, you know, we just have to look after one another, communication, talk about it. Let's all go and get this business when it's ready to come back.
Yeah. Terrific. Thanks, Anna. And a great way to end the session, everybody. Thanks for your time. Really value that you're interested in what we are doing and how we're trying to add value to part of your planning. We will continue to have a series of webinars. We're going to do a health and wellbeing one, if not next week, the following week. So thank you for attending. I'm going to finish with a whakatauki, a saying in te reo Māori that hopefully you can take some comfort in. Kia horo te mareno, kia whakapapa ponamu te moana, kia tiri te karohirohi I mua I tau huarahi. May the calm be widespread, may the oceans glisten as greenstone, and may the shimmer of light ever dance across your pathway. Kia ora everybody, thanks so much for attending. We'll see you next time. And thank you to our panelists, great job. Paki paki.
Well done, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, ka kite.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, good one guys, thanks heaps.